Okay, good evening all. Hope you're all safe and sound in your homes. Welcome to the Growth Planning Committee meeting for January 16th, 2024. And we will start off with the introductions of the members. Paul?
Paul Hogan.
Jane Evelyn.
Liz Johnson.
Mary Beth Gilbert.
Dan Saunders?
James McMahon.
And Galen Webley, just staff here, support staff.
Excellent. And online, do we have?
All you have online is Robin.
Hello, Robin. If you have any questions during the meeting, please just raise your hand and we'll have you piped in.
Yeah, it looks like our phone is not capable. I don't have, but we can try it. Maybe she hasn't activated it.
All right, so first on the agenda is a review and approval of minutes from the last meeting.
Make a motion.
Everyone get them today? I just sent them out today
Yep.
because I've never done it before.
Good job.
Good job.
Keep up the good work. I make a motion, we approve them.
All right, do I hear a second on that?
Sure, Paul.
All right, Paul, a second. Any discussion on the meeting minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We could raise our hands here, we're all together, instead of on the video screen and trying to figure out who said aye. Minutes passed, thank you very much for doing those, Liz.
Can I just clarify so anyone watching knows that I'm not voting no, that I'm just as a board member?
Yes, for sure.
As a board member, I'm not voting?
Yeah, so,
Do you have a vote?
no.
No.
You're just a
Yeah, just,
board of, not
Select-
just,
yeah.
but a
I'm
board of selectmen's
just a
rep.
board of selectmen
just a
that's
board of
here
selectmen
to
that were
to
allowed
work
to
with you
participate.
guys.
Yeah, so as an advisor, you're not allowed to vote on motions or make motions or second motions or vote on motions, so. But if, she doesn't like what we're doing, we'll get the elbow on the side. All right, so we'll continue our discussion on the proposed land use ordinance changes. And I would say we just kind of go back through the list because we did have some discussions on all these. And make a determination as we go through this, if everything seems to be fine with the way it's written. Hopefully at the end of the evening, whichever ones we're comfortable with, we can put a motion on whether or not we feel it's consistent with the growth planning, comprehensive plan. Okay. If we're not comfortable with it and we want some more adjustments, then we'll make that comment as well. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure.
All right.
Can we spend a little time just going through some of Galen's responses to the questions? Or is that not, or you want to go through?
No, I think we can do that, especially if we kind of go through those associated with each of those divisions, so it kind of goes together, right? So the first one's talking about ADUs, so accessory apartments would be a good place to discuss that, and associated with the changes in the ordinance.
Yeah, so the accessory dwelling units, again, we did reach out to SMPDC regarding this, and the legislature did clarify this in LD 1706. So this was the clarifying language that the state legislature passed after LD 2003. It also extended the implementation date for town meeting style to take that into consideration. And so in that, they did address the nonconformity. So essentially what the state legislation says is you can't make the non-conforming lot more non-conforming. So if they're maxing out in their lot coverage, you can't add to that to make it more non-conforming. But if they can do it interiorly and do a retrofit, and it's not making the unit more non-conform, then they can do it.
Okay.
So it all depends on the case-by-case situation that the code office will have to take into consideration when we do get an application.
Okay.
So that goes in line with what we were talking about last time, which is we would want to not permit something on a non-conforming, but unless it was interior.
Yep. And so you'll see that in the updated land use amendment for Article 7. There's a subsection I, and that's taken right out of LD 1706. And it says an accessory dwelling unit is allowed on a lot that does not conform to municipal zoning ordinance if the accessory dwelling unit does not further increase the nonconformity.
Just for the public, can you give a quick general description of non-conforming?
Yeah, so non-conforming is if there was a 40% total net lot coverage based off the parcel size, and you have I'll keep it fairly simple, 1,000 square feet parcel, and we're just looking at, let's say it's a 400 square foot building. You couldn't expand that more because that's exceeding the 40,000, the 40% lot coverage. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, I just want to make sure people understand what non-conforming is.
Yep.
You know, and with the setbacks and everything else, it's
Yeah.
triangle or something that's not square, it's not easily buildable, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And there is issues where, you know, your lot coverage, and, you know, I know you have that research, that parcel research that was in the 2009 comp plan. You have a term called net residential density, and that's your lot coverage. And you have to detract those steep slopes and wetland areas from your calculation of what your parcel size is. So really, the impact is minimal when you take all the factors of the wetlands that are in the different areas of our town. I mean, there's a lot of wetlands.
And are you talking specifically, Galen, about the maps that were in your answer?
Yeah, those maps.
Or are those
so,
something different?
some folks asked for a visual of like, what does it look like for the growth map area? And then also with the sewer and water, because that was the concern is, okay, what areas are we talking about?
Yep.
And so we wanted to give you that visual that you can see. This is the areas that are in the growth area map. That we have to allow those 2 to 4 units. And then public water and sewer, we have to allow them. So anywhere where there's public water and sewer, you have to allow for those up to 4 units, but they have to meet your density. They cannot not meet your density requirements for each additional unit. So
So density, by density, you mean lot area coverage or setbacks?
So the density, so lot coverage is different. That's how much impervious surface that the actual structure's taking up on the parcel. Density is how many residents you can have on a said parcel. It's the concentration of units.
So we've currently identified 20,000 square feet in one zone and
Yep.
40,000 square feet in another zone.
Yep.
That's the density. So they're saying
That's the residential density.
Yeah.
Yep. So
So-
for each additional unit, you need another 20,000 square feet of
or 40,000.
total. And again, you have to deduct your wetlands, your steep
Right.
slopes, all those
Yeah.
things that were in there.
So that was your that was the answer to Paul's question, was all those, okay, wetlands, minus wetlands,
Yep. That came
slope.
from your comp plan from 2009. And that was the calculation that the consultants that you were saying.
Robin's got a hand up.
Okay.
You wanna?
Hello, Robin.
I just have a quick question, just an example, since we do talk a lot about the village parcel. So the village parcel has, I think, 47 acres of buildable land, give or take, and 40 acres of wetlands, including a turtle pool. So are you saying, what is the maximum that could go on the village parcel, given that?
I would have to do a determination with code staff to determine that specific case. I'll pull up your definition though, that way everyone's talking the same lingo when it comes to your net residential density.
And do I understand that you have to use the maximum density requirement? So if you're going to go for affordable housing, you have to maximize that? Is that what you just said?
We have to allow 2.5 times what your base density is, your residential density for that specific zone for wherever that parcel is located.
Could you tell Robin to turn her iPhone on?
Hey, Robin?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I gotcha. Sorry
and
about
so-
that. I couldn't get the computer to work.
So your definition, your land use code has net residential area as deducting 15% for roads and parking. Land which is cut off from the main parcel by a road, existing land uses, or where there's no means of access. Land shown to be on a floodway or coastal high hazard area on a flood boundary and floodway map for flood insurance rate map prepared by the U.S. Department of Housing, Urban Development. There is other areas which are not suitable for development in their natural state because of topography, drainage, and subsoil condition. Specific conditions include, but are not limited to, your water table at or near the surface in all or part of the year, unstable soils such as Sebago mucky peat, coastal dune, and tidal marsh, and wetlands of any kind regardless of area. There's also any land of rights-of-way, any drainage, or stormwater management easements other than the utility easements serving the premise, and then land in resource protection, and then any wetland that is to be filled. So you can't calculate any of those areas as part of it. So it really is site-specific, and you'd have to do an analysis. So I can't really answer your
Yeah.
question, Robin, right off the top of my head.
Okay, so I'm just gonna give you a hypothetical. Say, excluding roads and all the things you brought up, there's 30 acres of buildable land on the village parcel. And I believe is it a half acre in that zone?
I don't
I
know.
think
I'm still getting my bearings.
build-
Do you know address?
So that would be village residential
It's village
for
residential.
part of it,
Yeah,
and then
farm
there's,
forest, or not free enterprise.
then
right?
there's free enterprise at the back end of it.
Right.
So,
There's two different zones, and they may have different,
right, I'm just trying to get a hypothetical here. So let's just say there's 20 half-acre lots in there that are buildable. So you're saying then you would be allowed to have 5 dwellings on a half an acre now, if, you know what I mean? So 2.5, you know what I mean? So is that the way that goes? I'm trying to get a rough estimate, because if that's true, that's quite dense.
yes, and that's with the affordable housing development. So it's
Yes,
two and a
I'm
half
aware of that.
times, right? We were originally talking about the 2 to 4, where it's unrelated to the affordability and more related to allowing additional homes on a lot.
Right, I understand that. I've
Okay.
followed all that. But I'm just trying to get a hypothetical with the LD 2003, which is quite complex. I've read it several times. They've changed it several times. It seems to me now what they're saying is 2.5 times density is what will be allowed. And
Right.
it seems like we're pushing for density bonuses. So if that were true on a half acre, you could get 5 dwellings, then that times 20, that would be very, very dense in there.
So to
Is
get,
that
we're going hypotheticals.
Yeah, hypotheticals.
So if it's 30 acres and of developable that you've taken out everything else is excluded, and we're just gonna use village residential parcel for simplicity purposes of 40,000 per unit, you're looking at 32 units on your base zoning, and if they were all affordable housing, you'd be at 81, is what you're looking at.
So you're saying the maximum would be 81 units on 30 acres at the village parcel?
That's buildable, yes.
On that 30-acre lot.
Yep, that there's no other,
In the village residential
yep, village residential.
section,
Yeah.
that zone, part
Playing
of the,
hypotheticals here, I don't know exactly what.
Yeah,
course.
so it's
I
a
just want full
it's a
disclosure.
broad-based hypothetical, because it's
Yes.
free enterprise zoned in there too, and I don't know what
Yeah.
that one means.
That's a difference.
But Robin, your example on a single lot, if it was 20,000 square feet, you're
Right.
allowed 1, and under the state law, you're now allowed 2.5, not 5, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 2.5 times
2.5
density.
times.
So five per acre up there.
Oh, it's 5? I thought it was,
It's 2.5 times.
2.5 on a half acre lot would be 2.5, on an acre would be 5, times 30 would be 150.
Just
Correct.
doubling the half acre.
yeah, but it's village residential is 40,000 square feet, right?
Yeah.
So it's an
So that's
acre.
almost an acre, just shy of an acre.
Oh, it's an acre
Yeah,
there,
so
okay,
it's
so-
2.5,
I
So
said
your number's
32.
correct.
two
I had
and a half,
32,
yeah, so 2.5 by an acre.
yeah.
So 2.5 times 30.
Right.
Is what you're
Yeah.
looking at, which is
Right.
where you got to
I
your
had
80.
81, yeah. I actually gave precise numbers, but
Yep.
that's,
but for me,
So
real
where
simple.
are the-
On a single, isn't it 2.5 would be allowed on on 2.5 units would be allowed on one
if they just want to
40,000?
do a little small
Yeah.
development, they
Right.
could. Yeah,
2.5 times 1 is 2.5.
But it's in the growth area, so it would be 4.
They have to meet your density. That's why I think people get hung up on. And they're gonna have to get growth permits on top of that.
So say
there's-
say
Right,
why
which
it's
is
not
our
4, because it's in the growth area. I
Because
thought.
they have to meet your density
density.
requirements.
So they have to be, our lot size says 40,000 square feet. Our
You can't do
density,
halves, you can't
we can't,
round up.
So I thought that was the purpose of LD 2003, though, was to take it where you were allowed one house on a given 40,000 square foot, and now you could have four.
Yep, but you have to meet the density. They don't get away from that.
What do you mean, meet the density? Could you
You have
explain
to
that
meet
a
the
little
density
better?
of that zone, so it's 40,000 per unit, you need to have 40,000 per unit.
So if you had a lot that was 160,000 square feet in that area, then you could put four.
Okay, so
You
what
could
it
break
does
your
is
lot into
so then what LD 2003 does is it doesn't cut the pie up smaller of a lot size.
No.
It basically allows you to cut a larger parcel and divide it into the 40,000 square foot or 20 or whatever is for that zoned area.
I mean, they can fit more density on a parcel if they're affordable housing,
Right.
but they still have to meet
That's
your,
what I'm talking about,
yeah.
affordable housing, because that's probably what is, they're aiming for the village parcel, at least partially. So if they're going for affordable, then it would be four per acre, correct? So 120?
Yeah,
No,
I think we have to,
You're
no,
gonna
yeah.
the two.
I think we've got to get back on that one
Yeah.
because I think wasn't the contractor looking at like 82 units when they first went into that property?
Something around that.
Something around there. So I think
'Cause
we.
based on our own bonus.
Yeah,
issues that
we've got to go back and look at those numbers and see, what
Yeah.
could be true based on this language.
Yeah, it would be good to know that.
So the 2.5 is associated with affordable housing development. So if you're gonna do a
Exactly.
development and 51% of the homes are gonna be for affordable housing, then you get that density bonus of 2.5 times whatever that lot size requirements are within that zone.
And again, they still have
Only
to file
for-
for a growth permit, so they're not just gonna open the floodgates and just,
So,
all this development's gonna happen.
I thought we didn't need a growth permit for affordable housing.
For accessory apartments, you don't. For the ADU piece, you don't.
Right, I understand that.
Affordable housing, they follow the same requirements. There's nothing in state statute that says they're exempt from that.
I thought under our own,
You have an exemption for elderly housing, but you don't have one for affordable housing.
okay,
I don't know, unless it is if it's an affordable housing for elderly, then yeah, it
right.
would be exempt.
Yeah, I thought it was the same for
Yeah.
that, so I'm wrong.
We didn't change the land use for that, so staff is looking at this from, they have to apply for growth permits.
And Galen, there's nothing in this LD 2003 that circumvents or leapfrogs our growth permitting process that was submitted in the comprehensive plan. So the permit numbers we talked about before, 20 units for, whatever the breakdown was, with LD 2003, that does not change. They do not require you to up them. It's business as usual per what they agreed on the comprehensive plan.
Yep.
Okay, good. That's a good clarification.
so, can I just ask one more thing and I'll leave you alone? Galen, sorry. So you're saying that we have 40 growth permits at the moment. So you're saying that the affordable housing is going to compete with the right, so there's only 40 total in town, no matter what?
Yes.
Really? They must have changed that in 2003 because before you could not cap affordable housing.
You can't have affordable
There was
housing.
no cap.
Said you couldn't cap it.
You can't cap it. You couldn't in the original LD 2003. They could have changed that. I didn't have a lot of time to read it today, but that was the initial LD 2003 was that they were not included in the growth permits. So that's an important thing to make sure we know what the actual rule is.
I will double check that, but my understanding is it did not change that. You couldn't prohibit it in your zoning, and that's what the big issue was with LD 2003. Especially with the 4 units, they did not want you, if you have a comprehensive plan, the thought process is you're planning for growth in your growth area. You should not have zoning that contradicts that and says, oh no, you can't have this type of density of 4 unit plus in your growth area, or where there's public infrastructure. That was where,
So, right. So they'll have to incorporate that into the 40, which I'm not sure that's true. And So then the people that are trying to develop their own regular housing will have a section like they have now. You know, you have some in the growth area, some in the, you know, rural. You have a certain amount of permits. So we're gonna have to figure out how many the affordable housing will get, no matter where they are, or they'll just be in that area.
First come, first.
It's first come,
Yeah,
first
come
serve
first.
each year.
So 40 is it. This is 40, that's period in a year, no matter what.
So I think on that line, if you, who has the authority to up the permitting in our town? You know, so the growth permit numbers, who sets that?
Look at 240-11-12,
It's in the ordinance.
Okay,
right.
There's a section that talks about D, 240-11-12D, I think. Maximum rate of house building. The town shall issue growth management permits on an annual basis. The total number of growth management permits shall be determined as follows. The number of growth management permits allocated for the year, excluding permits allocated for affordable housing, shall be 110%
Excellent.
of the mean number of growth management permits issued for the past 10 years, rounded to the nearest whole number.
Right, so that's excluding affordable housing.
Yeah, the mean is determined by adding together the total number of growth management permits issued, excluding permits issued for the affordable housing for each year in the prior 10 years, and then dividing by 10. In no case shall the available permits under this subsection be less than 40. So that's just the number that we're setting,
So if you look.
setting our number,
If you
right?
read down the subsections, though, it says the number of growth management permits allocated for the year, excluding permits allocated for affordable housing, shall be 110% of the mean. But then the subsection 2, the number of growth management permits available for affordable housing shall be 10% of the growth permits. So they still have to follow your growth
Right.
permits. And I did pull up LD 2003, Robin, to clarify, subsection 9 says rate of growth ordinance, a permit issued by a municipality for an accessory dwelling unit. So that is the accessory apartments in your land use code, does not count as a permit issued toward the municipality's growth rate. It does not say anything about affordable housing. It does not say anything about regular market. It's just the accessory apartments. That's the ones that are
So the-
part of a regular unit.
I think the confusing thing
Yeah, that's
for us
blurring
is
lines, yeah.
you need, if you're doing affordable housing, you need to get a growth permit.
Yep.
But the calculation excludes them.
Yep.
As you do the review to determine the amount that the town should give out.
Right.
And should be in the ordinance. So that always confused me. Now I understand that.
Yeah.
but now there's a,
It's
So
good to talk
then-
about these things.
but
and
then
good
to
questions.
cap that off, there's a formula for affordable housing, so it's not like the floodgates open for growth permits for affordable.
I mean, if they get
So
theirs
you
in
said it
first,
was
that's.
10%.
10%.
10% of the growth,
that's-
so we have a
That's
growth
only
permit.
4, though.
We have a growth permit of
40 is total. 20 in the,
20 in the gross.
20 in the growth, but a total of 40 overall.
So we would say that then we can give 2 or 4.
Well, you have to give at least 2 of them. So I guess if there was the floodgates were open and we had like all these permits come in, we have to give at least 10% to affordable housing.
Which, I mean, what's wrong with that?
Yeah,
That, you know, that,
Yep.
you know, I,
Right,
If-
that,
And
so it's no change
think
from what
that's
it's
fair.
been.
Yep.
I mean, I-
That's per year, which means that only
And you could have,
4 affordable
yeah.
housing units could be built per year.
I mean,
In
they
the
could
whole
get more
town.
if they beat all the developers to it and they put their applications in.
Right,
We're first come, first
but
served.
we have to hold 10%
Right.
for 'em.
Okay.
We just
all
do it
right.
on a rolling basis in the code office. They
Right.
just, whenever they come in, so.
Yeah, so
Thank
we
you.
addressed that.
Thank you
Got
for the
it.
clarification.
Thank
Good
you.
questions, Robin. Thank you.
So Galen, just
Very
back
much.
to the maps you had in the thing that you provided us. What is the difference between the 4 of them?
So what I did was I started to exclude them. That way you could see, the filtering
Oh,
of
okay.
per area, just so you have a visual grasp of, okay, this is how many 1 units there are, the yellow parcels, and then when you get rid of the orange ones is like the 2 units. And again, this is not taking into consideration any land constraints that are on the property. It doesn't take into consideration any existing parcel, any existing structures on the property, deed restrictions. I mean, there's property in here that's shaded red, that's the Rachel Carson Nature Center. I know you can't build on it. But I put it in there to give you a visual of, hey, here are the different parcels and this is what their potential impact is. But if you want to get into nitty-gritty numbers, I think that 2009 comp plan gave you a pretty good overview. They also probably went a little bit more into the weeds with each individual parcel by parcel. I didn't do that. I just gave you a visual. So,
We didn't get that far in the weeds. No. It was more of a broad brush,
Yeah.
what would be a high estimate, you know?
And so, just one more question before we get into the words. The graph that you gave us
Yep.
for existing versus potential?
yep.
So is the way we read this, so for example, I'll pull Cape Porpoise as an example. So you gave us a bar that said existing dwelling units in Cape Porpoise was 322, and then potential dwelling units was 185. And so we should add those together as total of what that capacity could be in Cape Porpoise, right?
I guess I don't.
So these are additive.
Yep.
So in Cape Porpoise, we would have 322 plus 185. And
The blue is your existing and the red is your potential. Yep.
Right.
And then again, if you wanted, this was taking your existing zoning that was back in 2009, so it did not take into consideration affordable housing. You could just 2.5 times that if you really want to just
Right,
get into
sure.
the weeds of things. But that's a rough idea, and maybe that'll help with education of the residents on, okay, what the potential impact is of this. I've been doing a lot of this with staff. We've been doing what-if scenarios, and I'm feeling more confident with these changes. I don't think that they're going to create a huge impact as what we initially thought it was going to be. That's just my,
So how do I equate that? Because I see a lot of the bars. So for example, Cape Rundle is close to double. Everything is almost close to doubling. Farm and Forest, Goose Rocks. Yeah.
that's your existing zoning. That's already been in existence for decades now.
Yeah.
You have
Okay.
we never changed anything with
Okay.
that.
And so, that's over how many years per the
Yeah.
permits we can allow?
Okay.
I mean,
I mean, that's the,
That's if tomorrow everyone wanted to develop the entire town,
Yeah.
that's how many potential units you could theoretically have. I don't think.
Okay,
it's
so this is built up all over. Everybody sold off land, broke up to the land use
Yep.
ordinance,
Maximum, yeah.
parcel size,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
everybody developed.
And everyone got their growth
Okay.
permits, and it's gonna, I mean,
And
take
that's
that
what
number,
our town would look like.
and we know the contractors are so busy that you'll never get them on the phone.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yep.
Helpful, very helpful.
all right, so, on the affordable housing
So are we still
section.
ADU or?
So we have proposed changes in red, and then we added the blue as the most recent, right?
Yep, so, if you're on Article 7, which is,
Accessory
I'm looking
apartments.
at
Sorry.
April's packet, that she put together for you.
Oh, April's, I
Yeah.
thought that was yours.
That way we go page by page. Article 7, there,
Wait, which April email, just so that it was this was back in January 3rd or something?
let me.
No, she just sent it.
This was in the one with the agenda?
Yeah, the one
There was-
before the.
Is it attached to
Yep.
the,
Yep.
That's what she
Yep.
looked at,
Memo.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was the first one, and then the second one she sent more.
is it attached to the agenda?
Yeah,
On
the agenda,
website?
there's a memo one, and it's Friday, the 12th at 1:05 PM. We sent that out. So if we go to the first page, that's the Article 7. You'll see that blue down at the very bottom, that section I. This is, again, the Growth Planning Committee brought up a very good question. We had to research it. How do we deal with non-conforming lots? So we added that section there. I will have to make a quick little update, though. I realize I put accessory dwelling unit and not accessory apartments, but I'll update that.
Okay.
That was from the state statute.
Just on the town website and the agenda, these documents are not attached, and they should be for the future.
I'm sorry.
If I go look at the agenda on the website,
Yep.
all I have is the agenda
Yep.
without these attachments.
Okay.
So it's very difficult if you're at home
Okay.
or even here looking for it
Yep.
to know what we're talking about.
Okay.
So
Yep.
if we get attachments, they should be posted.
Okay. Yep.
For public, yep, and us.
Thanks. Now I'm going to go back and try to find the email.
So this is the part where you're just referring to where if it's, you
Yes.
can't make it not additionally
We
increase
can't
the
make it more
non-conforming.
non-conforming than what it is.
Ah, good.
And that was something that the committee brought up, that was a good question, and I talked to Southern Maine Planning, and they thought that was a good way we can update it, is from LD 1706. The other thing that came up today, I just wanted to brief you, it's not on this page, but I wanted to talk about it with you. I played a little role-playing with the staff on, okay, what-if scenarios. And there's the subsection F that's on that page that deals with accessory apartments shall be occupied as a primary residence. And the primary residence shall be defined as 6 months per year. An accessory apartment is not eligible to operate as a short-term rental, we understand that. However, the staff and I were playing with this and saying, okay, what happens after that person who applied for the accessory apartment, 6 months down the road, they move out and they decide, hey, I want to make this on a month-to-month basis, or I want to change the use of it, that it's just more of a vacation. There's no mechanism there for code to enforce that. And so what I'd like to add as a subsection is, if they decide to not make it a primary residence anymore, that they remove the kitchen facilities or the cooking facilities. That is the one thing in the building codes that qualifies and defines a dwelling unit. So if they remove it, it's just a bedroom at that point. It can have a bathroom, but as long as there's no kitchen facility, it's not considered a dwelling unit. So I want to add that language in there for an enforcement mechanism. It's a catch-all in case someone were to nefariously, go through this process. The intent was for in-law quarters. I think that was the intent. Family, people to be their
Kids.
primary.
Yep.
It's not to be a vacation.
Right, absolutely not.
Use.
Right.
And so by adding that mechanism, enforcement, if we get complaints, we can at least say it's a violation of land use code and take them through the legal process for enforcement.
But the short term, so you're talking like a month, but if this person, we wouldn't allow them to lease it, a yearly lease.
They could do yearly lease, as
Right,
long
so
as
what's
it's a
the
primary
problem with
residence
them?
for someone.
Right.
The issue is if it's not a primary residence, like, let's say someone wanted to just do it for vacation, hey, I want to come up here for vacation, and I'm only here for 2 months or 3 months out of the year.
So you don't have to, it doesn't have to be a family member. It can be anyone. When we went through our meeting last time on our cheat sheet, the primary owner still owns title to this property. It's not a separate tax. So it is a lease or it is something long-term. But how would you define a kitchen? Isn't there like a slippery slope there? Like,
We
is
would
a
say
microwave a
We'd say
kitchen?
cooking facilities, and it's in the building code that there's a clear definition. It's mostly a stove and oven of some sort. That's their mechanism for code. Where this becomes a problem is if the primary residence who's there decides, I don't want to live here full-time in Kennebunkport. I want to come up here just 3 months out of the year. Now you don't have a primary residence on the property. It's no longer in compliance of what an accessory apartment is.
Right, and that's if they're offering their main house
Right.
to somebody else, and then we talked about they could live in the accessory dwelling, and they're the primary resident. So now what you're saying is you want to,
A realtor company comes in and says, I want to just rent it out.
so, yeah, so I'm just trying to go
short
through
term,
I'm
but-
trying to go through the scenarios of somebody, say you got somebody that goes to Florida,
Yep.
and, there's an opportunity for somebody local to live 6 months out of the year and lease that, or maybe they just pay month to month. I don't see a problem with that. I don't know how I don't think I'd want to close that loop. To offer people, say somebody moves out of a place, or their rent goes up, and they're searching for somewhere else to live. If they need a month or 2 months, I don't know. I think that's okay. I don't know if I'd want to close that.
But that's
Well-
not
Well, right now
our
it's 6
initial
months.
direction.
6 months is a requirement.
Yeah, that's not
That's-
So
our,
it's a 6-month
you have
lease,
to-
but how, so,
Well, it could be a 10-year lease, but it's got to
Yeah.
be a minimum of 6 months.
Yep.
yeah.
You could lease it for 30 years. That's your apartment.
So
That's where you're domiciled.
right, so why do you bring up the month, so explain to me why would we be concerned about a minimum of a month then?
Because we have no enforcement mechanism, because you have a primary residence of 6 months. That's in your current land use code. There's no way we can enforce this if they decide to convert this and say, I don't want to do,
Right.
I want to do it on a.
So implied right now, it's if they want to do that, they have to go into a term with somebody for a 6-month term.
Yes, that has to be their primary residence.
Right, so as long as they show that, why would we want to restrict it differently? Because, I mean, if somebody lives there for a month and they move out, that person has to find somebody else again, or they can't rent it.
Yep, they have to just make sure it's a 6-month lease.
Right, I don't,
We have no mechanism to control this.
as
The
long as that
question
says
is,
6
the
months.
question is the enforcement.
Yeah.
Is
we
there
won't
any
be
other
able to
way,
enforce this if,
is there any other way to enforce it other than requiring the person to
Tear out their kitchen?
tear out their kitchen?
Yeah, I don't want to do that. That's-
Like, I have an accessory apartment, I may not use it for a couple of years, and then I decide I need the income, and
that's fine, you're not renting it out then.
you're not renting it out,
We're not,
so there's no enforcement.
So they have to prove, they have to at least show that they have some kind of a 6-month term with somebody, right?
there has to be a 6-month lease, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, we have to be careful here. Like, why we want to do this is be careful because, we do have the short-term rental agreement or, structure. So we can't have the accessory dwellings or accessory apartments circumvent the SRO, right, or the short-term rental.
And they have to get that short-term rental license to do that.
So,
If they
but-
don't, then they can't.
But if they're set up as an ADU, the ADU or the accessory dwelling was, given and an LD 2003, it's basically, any piece of property in town, any of those growth transition rural can have one of these, but it's not. So this is where we do have to think through how to monitor this, because otherwise you have a head fake. It's like, hey, accessory dwelling, I got accessory apartment, and then, oh, nobody's watching, so now
Right.
I'm
You're-
just gonna rent it out, so I think that's part of a issue.
I mean, it's the neighbors that watch, right? The
Right.
neighbors start seeing a new car there every week.
Yeah, but
Hey, what's going on?
but we wanna make sure that we're not,
We have a lot of
But,
those.
I mean, I think it's good though, because it's like, if we say like, this is what we enforce, you have to have a 6-month lease. If they actually don't know that, then that's a good thing. They realize, oh, thank you very much. I know I have to go on a term with this person and sign that agreement to have that 6-month, or I can't do it. Sorry, you gotta leave. I thought I could do month to month. I can't do that. I have to do 6 months. I don't think it's necessary to make somebody tear their kitchen out or do something like that. I'll vote against that. I don't think that's a good idea.
Again, we're just bringing this to your
Yeah.
attention. It's something to think about. The other thing that I
Could-
noticed with staff is we don't have an inventory complete in our possession for all the accessory apartments in town. And so I'm having staff start to compile that.
Yeah.
Because again, for administration of the short-term rental piece, you can't be an ADU, you can't be an accessory
Right,
apartment.
it has
And
to.
so we need to have no one's ever cross-referenced, so I'm making sure that we're doing that process.
so the tearing out of the kitchen is no different than what we have now in our rules. So for example, because right now the accessory, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the accessory apartments foul the current owner. They do not transfer with the property. So if I have an accessory apartment that I built for my mother, and then, she's no longer requiring it, I sell, that accessory dwelling does not transfer. I don't pass that on to the new owner. I don't know if that, in this new LD 2003, Galen, the way I think our current ordinance work is that it doesn't transfer. I don't know if LD 2003, it does transfer. And if it does.
I don't think they can't advertise it. Real estate agent would be like.
And that's where they actually, if you had talked to the code guys before, they would actually require the kitchen to be removed. We actually had that
It happens all the time.
trapping or requirement, when you put it on the market, that kitchen has to get pulled out because you
Yeah.
no longer can have it. So we already do that
Yeah.
theoretically.
Is that, when you apply for accessory dwelling unit, is that accessory apartment, is that a license?
It's part of building permit, that's all it is.
Okay.
It's nothing, there's no special permit, there's no special application, they just use a building permit. And that was what amazed me, it floored me. I was like, what do you mean we don't have a inventory list? Like, we should have a better,
Yeah.
Yeah, but those permits aren't on file? We can't go back and?
They are,
Oh,
but
okay,
they're
good,
not.
good.
Just have to go
Yeah,
back
so you
and
can
do
go back,
research.
yeah, oh, yeah, okay.
and you have to differentiate the building permits, because sometimes someone
Yeah.
says, oh, I want to do a patio, and then I want to also put this in. So
Mm-hmm.
we have to go through all that.
But I think this is really important to what Galen and the staff brought up, because it's oversight. And you actually could play this forward and see this rolling out of control with, we could go out 3 years from now or 2 years from now, and all the work the town did for short-term rentals would be obfuscated, because you could have the accessory dwellings just literally populate. Because again, they are allowed in any section of the town, so they can go into the growth area, into the center of the port, and all the areas where we have restrictions. So I think we do have to think through some type of regulation, and I don't know
Well,
what that
could you
is.
put in there that if you decide you no longer want to have an accessory
Yeah,
apartment,
it's still bedroom.
that
you're
you
fine.
must remove,
Yeah, you can do that.
you must remove your,
And we allow that, them to do that. It's still
no,
bedroom.
so therefore you wanted to use
Yeah,
that
people can
room.
remodel or whatever.
Yeah.
You wanted to use that room for a roomer, if it fit in that ordinance,
Yeah.
or you wanted to do it as a short-term rental, then you gotta pull the kitchen out. Then you can do that, and you gotta get your license to follow all those rules,
Yep.
right?
Do we
Maybe
have
that
any
is-
idea what other towns who feel the way we do about short-term rentals are doing?
I know Biddeford and Kennebunk, they both put in their updates to LD 2003 that ADUs, accessory apartments, are not allowed to be used for short-term rentals. They put similar prohibitions in place to what you guys put in as well. So
But in
that's,
terms of monitoring it and enforcing it, do they have any
that's a good
Suggestion.
question. I haven't-
genius ideas?
Yeah, I
But
know,
we do-
I know
we-
they're meeting, the converging of minds of all the code officers is happening next week in Wells, so I'll ask them to talk to the different,
I mean, for the
Can I-
roomer, you have to get a permit.
Right.
For a short-term rental, you gotta get a permit. So either one of
Yeah.
those, if you wanna do those, they gotta walk into the office and say, this is what I wanna do. And then once you have the cross-check,
For
it
which
says, well, you
ones?
have an ADU there.
for which ones?
There's a the rumor ordinance, which allows you to rent one
Oh, okay.
room
Yep.
in a home. And then there's the short-term rental, and both of those require a permit to do. So
They require
someone's
license,
not doing either
A
one of
license,
those.
They
yeah.
they're in
require
It's a
violation of
license,
that,
yeah,
right?
which can be
So-
revoked.
Yep.
And then once we have the cross-reference to the auxiliary, to the accessory apartments, you could say, hey, well, wait a minute, you got an accessory apartment there, what's the intent with that? They may still wanna, rent, they still may have an actual person in there at least for a year or whatever.
Yep.
Living there.
So the way the code's looking at this, again, you guys can mull it over. We can
Yeah.
always add amendments later down the road. I just want to bring this to your attention. If we put that subsection in there about elimination of the, cooking facilities, if they don't want it to be a primary, as an accessory use, that's now a violation of the land use code, which has statutory fines that we can legally
Right.
take them to court over. If we spell it out, it gives us a clear indication, like, look, this was an accessory apartment, it was a dwelling unit. We told them they didn't have to, continue operating as an accessory apartment. They could just remove the kitchen. They decide not to, notice a violation, and we go through the enforcement.
And how much is the
But-
permit? How much is the permit?
It's a building permit, I'm not sure
Yeah,
what.
so it's I want to put faith in people that are going to do the right thing and, follow the rules and stuff, and I just don't see our town frivolously, breaking the rules and stuff,
Yeah, but you gotta have it in there. There are people who will.
No, of course they will, but of course, and they've already made a cost-effective, an expense to do it, so hopefully we can get them set in the right direction to get the permit, conform to it, and do the right thing.
Quick question to James' question earlier. So I have an approved accessory apartment. I decide at some point I don't need all the space I had, so I want to move into my accessory apartment. Can I make my primary house a short-term rental?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
I would say so.
yeah.
You just have to get.
I'm
Just as the
still
accessory
the
apartment's not
6-month
allowed.
resident. I become, let's say,
Yeah.
I become the 6-month resident in my accessory apartment, but I decide to rent out the house.
You just gotta apply for that license.
Yep.
I would have to apply for short-term rental license, sure, or
Yeah,
long,
and-
yeah.
Or less
yeah.
if you're in Goose Rock's Beach, you can apply and you'll get it, right? You just have
Yep.
to submit,
There's no
Right.
cap for.
But you
the-
would still have to live in your accessory apartment for 6 months,
right?
Right,
primary residence.
right.
If you
But you could
you
see,
went to Florida for.
you could see
9
people
months,
doing
you
that.
wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah.
What's the cap on short-term rental permits each year?
So it's a calculation, it's 9.5% of the total dwelling units excluding Goose Rock's Beach. And I might.
You're doing
have-
good, Galen.
I might still have that actual number for you, because I
So
presented it in
Goose
front
Rock's
of
is 100% open.
um,
You just apply and get it.
the council. So in April of 2023, because we always have to go when the tax year is.
Yeah.
So this upcoming year, there was 2,468 units, which would calculate to 234 licenses for short-term rentals outside of Goose Rock's Beach.
Wow.
Before, the prior year, it was 228, so it increased.
Sure.
You just presented that.
I did.
to the board. I was wondering, I was thinking you have the numbers.
Yeah, I was like, I still have the numbers from the last meeting, so,
Okay.
normally I throw those things.
Yeah, so that, to answer Paul's question, that we had talked about that scenario, right, at some point, and that was a thing, and it may benefit, for example, somebody, it may benefit a senior person or somebody trying to make ends meet.
Sure.
So we're not going to, as long as they're in the dwelling unit, the accessory dwelling or apartment, then they can rent out, they can apply for a short-term rental and rent out the larger dwelling.
Yeah, that is allowed. It says the accommodations are, it says the prohibition for short-term rentals, subsection 2, the accommodations are accessory apartment constructed or permitted after November 3rd of 2009. So, yeah, it's only applying to accessory apartments, so, yeah. Just gotta go through that wait list if you're outside Goose Rock's Beach.
Do you see,
You know,
do you,
an owner could still, an owner of the home could actually never live there, right?
Yes,
He could rent out
the
the
big
accessory
house.
apartment for 6 months or more, and then have a short-term rental for the home.
No. The resident has to,
In the
Sorry.
Does
accessory,
the resident have to be in the home for a
Yeah.
short-term rental?
no,
no,
For the roomer, they do. If they were renting a
Right.
room, if they were trying just to rent a room, they have to be in the home. But I don't see anything in the accessory apartments that states that the owner of the, primary owner of the home.
so maybe that's
has to live.
maybe that's the wording then, is that, maybe that's the wording that has to happen, is, to Dan's point, the ADU, or the accessory apartment, has to be, a residence in 6 months, and one of the buildings, either the main house or the accessory, has to be
occupied?
occupied by the owner, by the property owner. That's, because what we're looking for is to give rights for property owners here, to provide housing for family or, 6-month rental income. What we don't want to do is open the floodgates for what the short-term rentals was supposed to stop, which is a lot of investment money coming in, and they just are flipping, just pure rentals, right?
But let me,
Can we do
So-
that?
so I'm looking at, it's section 247.1. I agree with Dan that the owner currently doesn't have to be a resident in that apartment. And I think, you could see situations where families have houses and 5 family members share the house and they split it up, the primary house, and they could have an accessory apartment there, and they could have a local living there 6 months or more in the accessory apartment as a way to, provide housing for somebody and to generate some income, have somebody watch the property during the winter. But the main house part of it, there may not be any permanent resident.
Right.
3 people share it through a trust, or they
Yeah.
share it as siblings. but none of them are primary residents. They all live in Massachusetts or whatever.
Right.
And I think that would still, I think that's the way it could operate currently.
Yeah.
And the concern is, well, there's no change except that we could have more accessory apartments. So this has been the code, but now we're going to allow accessory apartments in the building or adjacent to the building or next to the building. You know, a tiny house can be put up.
I think the wording needs to be, though, that, because that scenario makes sense, but flip it, there probably wouldn't be very many of these, but where they have a local non-owner living in the accessory unit in the summer, well, it doesn't matter which season, they can't, we need to add wording that the homeowner can't have a
a short-
non-owner in the accessory dwelling apartment for 6 months and rent the other place short-term.
Well, he can't rent the accessory short-term ever.
Right.
He could, so he could rent it for 7 months to somebody, and he could rent it during the summertime to, for a month,
Right.
or
they
use it
rent
by
it?
family members
Can
during
they-
the summertime.
Can they rent it, can they have a renter in the accessory dwelling unit for 6+ months? And your scenario, the house is owned by multiple family members who only come up in the summer. Can they rent it year-round or anytime can they rent the main house short-term?
Yeah, they can.
So therefore, no owners ever living there.
Yep.
Right now, that's the way it's set.
That's the way your current land, that's the way the current land use is.
Right, but how do we want to word it for these accessory dwelling unit future?
I'm generally okay with that. I mean, it's a family that owns the house. It's
Yeah.
a family of folks that are using it. If they use it 3 months a year, 1 week a year, or they come up.
And they rent it a month or,
Whatever they want to use it.
You got an old
They have an
person.
accessory apartment that they're following the rules on. I'm good with that. I am concerned, though, that the way it's written
But you,
would allow, folks that just want to come in and all they want to do is rent. And okay, I got somebody signed up for the accessory apartment, but we're gonna flip that. There'll be somebody in there every week. We get our short-term rental thing.
But they'd be violating the
But
short
they'll
term.
be following the short-term
so
rental.
they're in violation
Right,
of
so-
short-term.
right, so-
We limit how many short-term rentals you can have.
Okay, so.
No,
yeah,
no,
so
but-
you're covered then.
But you only, but you could have you could have so yes, in town we limit,
Yeah,
but
so-
at the beach we don't.
Right.
So you could really, flip the beach.
Isn't the beach already mostly?
yeah, every house has been a short-term rental
I
at
saw
some
one-
point.
No, but I mean, in terms of, yeah, I'm just thinking through as we're all talking.
Yeah,
Well, who has a pulse on what happens down at the beach? Like, if there's a short-term rental, like the house, and there's an accessory dwelling that may be the primary residence, do these people, do they go to Florida, in my example, or do they continue to live there? Do they still have their short-term rental license, but they decide to rent the main house for 6 months to, like, say, me or somebody else? Is that what happens?
Everything
Okay,
happens.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think.
I mean, and people have had, I know a woman out there, this is long before accessory apartments, but she has a little tiny house, and she moves out to the little tiny house for 6 weeks so that she can pay the taxes, which are exorbitant, and, shares the big house with family when not.
Good, and she pays her taxes.
And she pays
That's
her-
great.
Yeah, and she's able to stay in place. She couldn't keep
Great.
it.
So I don't think we can do any more.
I think I would leave that as is then.
Yeah,
It's just, it's a risk.
it's a thing that, maybe to Jim's point and all the conversations now, we don't know what type of behavior this may or may not.
Yeah.
And we can't strong arm it, nor do we want to strong arm it, because there's, like Paul brought up, there's multiple reasons why people either want this for children or for their own personal finances, and we do have short-term rentals that cap it in town, so that's one way to alleviate the pressure. And as long as we keep the 6 months on the ADU, and we have language in there that if it comes a different use, the kitchen gets pulled out, and we have it per code where we can, you know, enforce, so to
Yeah.
speak, then I think we're good.
So the enforcement piece of that would only happen if somebody starts to use it against the rules.
Yep,
And-
we get a complaint, or there's, you know, we notice that they're
Right.
starting to renting it.
But isn't their remedy to stop doing the practice? Why does the kitchen have to be ripped out in that case? If they're not doing it, they get a violation. And does the remedy have to be rip out the kitchen? Can't the remedy be stop doing the practice because I may want to 2 years from now?
You can. You have more teeth if you gave them options when you go in front of the court saying, well, we gave them the option of doing this, not just
Taking out the
short-term
kitchen,
rentals.
yeah.
So it's not an automatic.
Right.
See, I guess I mean, I understand the normal, you violate an ordinance, the town has the right to go after you and to, you know, go to a court and get an injunction
Yep.
or get a fine.
So the practice of illegal dwelling units
Yeah,
is well established in Maine municipalities. We've constantly been dealing with people that have constantly gone.
right, but this is
covered
this is something that was created legally
But-
with a permit.
Your only violation that you have is that they're in violation of your short-term rentals, which is something very new, and it's not been really challenged. And so I'm trying to give you more level footing for an enforcement perspective, if you're going in front of the judge.
So it doesn't mean that we're going to
We can enforce it,
create,
it's just,
we can
I-
force it, but we don't need to. We can just say, hey, like to Paul's point, we can say, hey, we're calling you on it. Don't make us go to the next
Yeah.
step, because we can, because it's in our code.
Yep.
But we're not going to. And so that's the, you know, the kind
But
of
what's the,
gentler.
do you have the language? Do you have a proposed language?
I would put that, I can get you that language. It was gonna be the elimination of the cooking facilities. If they, should the owner want to convert this from a primary, if they are in violation of the primary residence, code requests the elimination of cooking facilities in said unit. to
But
keep it in compliance.
to me, that's down the road. The first step is you don't do it anymore. You get called on it.
Yeah,
You serve them with a
So
notice.
we could say something like to your, say, to, you know, not do it, and then to include up to removal of the kitchen. So make the words so that it can migrate up to that level.
yep.
I mean, I'd rather just, you know, cite what's in existence already. The short-term rental and the accessory dwelling, it's gotta be 6 months. It's just, I'd rather cite that. If we're gonna put any language in, I'd rather cite that.
Yeah, I guess,
I'd rather cite that than have to go down the road of like, us spending taxpayer money trying to like go to court to tear out a kitchen.
Well, you may have to go to court to get the person to stop the behavior.
Yeah,
If someone continues to have short-term rentals in an accessory apartment,
we're gonna have to.
Right, but
because
if
they're violating the short-term rental ordinance, and that would be a fine, and then you could get
Yeah,
an injunction.
of course, yeah,
Right.
I mean,
absolutely.
they'd have to
And-
technically
and-
file a demolition permit, right?
Demo permit,
Yeah,
yeah.
to get rid of the.
Free this week.
Kitchen.
They're free. Demo, yes, demo.
They're free right now, but
Demo
you would
permits are
technically
free
have to
this
do
week.
that. And it's the first time I honestly heard of the.
But
demolition
what's the, I mean, what's the cost that? What is, if you abuse the short-term rental,
What's the fine? I don't
yeah,
know offhand.
what is the, I mean, that's, I mean, again, what's
You
gonna be
mean rent if you don't
cost-effective for
have a
somebody,
permit?
what's gonna be cost-effective for somebody to do, is this is.
Well, it
not
has to be
worth-
more than money. The money has to be, you know, serious, but
Yeah.
you ultimately get an injunction from a court saying you can't do it. If-
Yeah, you're gonna lose money, and I mean, again, I want to give the benefit of the doubt to the people, I mean, hopefully we don't have a lot of abusers, it's just not gonna be cost-effective for them to do any of this, you
Well, I
know?
think we have to have, to Galen's point, I think we have to have, to protect the town and to protect the people that are following the rules, we have to have language in here that the town can fall back on in case somebody decides, you know, to go wayward.
So, could we just put like J, where it just says if you choose to use this space, if you want to use this space for short-term rental or for the roomer provision, you must remove the kitchen. And,
I think
Right.
short-term rentals are allowed to have kitchens, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
so you can't do that. That's
Yeah, you
what-
can't
Well, you
have
can't-
it flip. So this was
Well,
permitted, we
this-
have to,
But this space can't have it. This particular space, the accessory apartment can no longer have the kitchen.
right, but I think we.
Well, if you don't use it, you can keep it.
So I think you had the word "could" in there when you first made your statement, is the possible wording
For which one?
for removing the
We would put,
kitchen.
yeah.
It could be removed.
yeah, it's up to the owner. If they don't want to go that route, they don't have to go that route. They can just stop renting. Like,
Right.
Yeah,
they can rent to a primary residence, that's their prerogative. They had they knew the rules going into this is what they were allowed to do. We're
Yep.
not, if they're in compliance, but if they're
Right.
not,
we need, if
the
they're
only
not,
thing you have is
Can-
the 6-month violation.
So just put like, any other use, that violates this, such as a short-term rental or month-to-month lease is in violation and is,
I guess I don't understand why a change is necessary. We've always had this, we've had the 6-month requirement in there for years in some of the town and for other shorter period of time in the rest of the town. And why is it different than any other enforcement?
So we haven't enforced it yet.
Yep.
Because remember, we don't have an inventory of all of our ADUs, as I just shared with you all.
how many complaints have we had, though?
None that I know of.
Okay,
I
all right.
just got here, so
Okay. Yeah, yeah. No, it's-
well,
not this week.
we actually had a couple situations.
we did.
Yeah, I'm sure there have
And
been.
it's hard when things aren't written, and so that's where I fall back to.
Right, what was the
It's-
result, though? What, like, these people, did they say, oh, I didn't know, or?
No, it
Yeah, I
was-
knew what I was doing, and I was just getting money, like, I knew what I was doing.
But if someone calls in to say, my neighbor, I see all this activity going on, it didn't used to be this way, you'd take the phone call, you'd look at the file, you'd see that there was an accessory dwelling unit, accessory apartment, properly permitted or not. And we know what the ordinance says, so wouldn't the code officer in that situation call up, pay a visit, and say, what's going on here?
Yep.
And you would have the right, under the current ordinance, to enforce the current ordinance. I don't see why you'd need more power than that.
So
I
we would
agree.
issue again, it's your prerogative. We would issue a notice of violation.
Right.
They have so many days to remedy the
Right.
situation. They decide not to, then it's up to the select board, I believe. I don't know if it's the same procedure here, but to authorize enforcement in front of, hire an attorney to go take them to court.
Right.
Your only standing is that they're in prohibition of your short-term rental ordinance, which is a fairly new ordinance in Maine, which I don't believe there's much case law on, but I could be wrong.
Well, no, the enforcement is you don't have, you're renting it out, and the person you're renting it out to,
Doesn't have a lease.
it doesn't have a 6-month lease.
Right.
That's not, has nothing to do with the short-term ordinance, which is new.
It's accessory,
Somebody comes in and says, oh, yeah, I had this person for a month and this person for a month, and I lost my person. I thought I was going to have somebody for the whole winter, and,
And can you revoke a permit? Can you revoke a permit?
well, it's not a permit.
No, but the accessory dwelling is a permit, though.
They can't,
It's already permitted. It's
already
not a
permitted,
license.
it's done.
it's not licensed.
There's no license with
Okay.
the.
So but that's what I
accessory.
mean, it's the
Yep.
difference between
It's
a
different.
license and a permit. You can't revoke a permit.
But if they can't produce the 6-month
Lease, yeah.
lease for you,
Yep.
then you have an enforcement, opportunity. If if you can't make peace and get the person, get the practice to stop, you take them
Yep.
and you enforce it.
Right.
And I don't see what the problem is.
Taking a kitchen out.
The judge is going to say, you've been doing this and you don't have a 6-month here, you can't do this, and the town will win. The person could then, a month later, get a 6-month lease and could legally use his accessory dwelling unit, or just leave it empty, or just give it to relatives in the summertime, and not have any, not be collecting rent, not be renting.
yeah.
So I don't I don't see, I mean, family situations are so fluid at the beach. You know, it belongs to 5 people this year, it belongs to 2 people this year. They transfer it to the grandchildren. You know, if there's an accessory dwelling unit that's legal, it either can be rented legally or it can't be rented. And it may not be used as an accessory dwelling unit until the cash is short or the kids go to college and they need to rent it out. And should they have to put another kitchen in?
I would suggest that we leave it as is for now.
Yeah.
Bring this up later, because we only have this meeting and I think next meeting to sort of
So
resolve
I
the
need
other
to
issues.
submit it this Thursday to Lori for, the select board can make changes, but I need to,
We could, well, we can make changes through the second one in February.
you can do whatever you want.
We've got some support here.
So if there's no
Oh, me?
questions with that first page with the Article 7, that's really the only other changes that, I think someone had a question about the stormwater.
Can you
on-
yeah, I did.
Yep.
Can you screen share this? Because I hate to vote on anything that I don't
I'm not in
see in
Zoom
front of
right
me and
now.
can't read. And I've looked for
Let me get Zoom.
an email from April today and I can't find it.
It's not today, it was sent on,
112,
Let
112,
me-
Paul,
yep,
112.
112 at 1:06 PM. It's the agenda.
Oh, it's on
The
the-
subject is the 1/16/24 meeting.
I'm getting there. Okay, open. Hopefully I can mute this.
Find it?
No, I'm looking, Dan printed this out.
I don't know why I have to give my email, but okay.
So the blue was the latest, right?
Yep.
The red was what we've talked about previous, and the
Yeah, that was what Lee J put as like
Yep,
a
as a primer.
language that,
Yep.
hold on.
Mute yourself. Where are you coming? Oh, there you are. Hold on.
We got a lot of echo on.
I'm gonna promote you to panelist. You're gonna have to mute yourself, Dylan.
I'm trying, I don't know how to.
Nope, the,
I'm muted.
mute the PC.
Yeah, mute the PC, not your mic. All right, you're in, so you can share it.
Technology.
Technology. Let's see.
I think we're doing pretty good with technology. Right? Storm night, things up and running.
Come on.
Yeah.
EH&S.
One minute. Start my video, I guess.
All right. Go ahead and share your item.
Am I sharing?
Go ahead.
It's disabled.
All right, let's try this again. Share screen. All right, try it now.
Okay, there we go. Hopefully this works.
All right,
We all can see it?
all right, hold on.
Nope. Don't know why not.
Oh, that's good. Easy.
So is this H that we're gonna?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there a way I can make this bigger?
Wouldn't that be nice?
You have to open up the whole thing, not. Like the attachment, open up the attachment. Did you lose your mouse?
I cannot see.
Okay, so
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
So H is any addition to the primary structure or new standalone accessory apartment shall provide a stormwater analysis, and where recommended by the study author, recommended stormwater improvements shall be put in place as part of the permit issued for the proposed use.
And I sent around an email to everybody.
Yep.
I thought this is essentially no different than what the ordinance that has been totally ineffective, that's on the books right now, that says where possible, make reasonable efforts to manage stormwater. And it has never been enforced, or at least the impacts of it have not been realized. And I do not think people have been required to provide the plan. This is helpful, but it doesn't require any, it doesn't provide any standards at all. So I think, at least in my view, stormwater management is probably the top priority in this town. This week, next 5 years, next 10 years. So I provided some standards, and just, I provided a draft to everybody. I just got back in town and didn't print it out and share it, sorry.
You emailed it, though?
What's that?
Yeah. Okay.
I did.
113.
The numbering of mine is a little off. I was doing this on an iPad in Colorado.
Brag, brag, brag.
So my first is to say you have to provide a drainage plan. The second, in H1, which I've proposed we add, says it needs to be designed to minimize the amount of water leaving the site. This must include consideration of the design and location of improvements to minimize the total area of impervious surface. I stole all of this from the South Portland ordinance, by the way. I just took a 3-page thing and made it, much shorter, because they have many more standards than we have. And theirs applies to non-subdivision projects. Every non-subdivision project has to do this. This is just talking about accessory apartments. We don't have any standards for any non-subdivision drainage plan currently in our ordinance, which I think is a failing. And then it says any stormwater draining onto or across the lot in pre-improvement state will not be impeded or redirected to as create ponding or flooding on adjacent lots. And that's the primary purpose of this, so you're not making the neighbor's situation worse by what you do here, by adding a new addition to your house for an accessory apartment, or by adding another house on your property for an accessory apartment. Did you find it, Jim?
Yeah, I'm looking up. Yep.
Okay. And basically, the plan has to, any increase in the volume from the lot onto adjacent following the improvement can be handled. Well, it says, if you are dumping it onto your neighbor's property, that you have the right to do that. So you go get an easement, or you put the drainage pond next door. That's what that B section is. And then the last part is, what must the drainage plan include? So the plan has to show that it's been designed to meet these requirements, has the location of the streams and drainage courses, the existing proposed grading of the site using 1-foot contours, which is what you would do if you were doing a subdivision, the location and area of the buildings and impervious surfaces on the site, the existing patterns of flow and what you're going to do to it, essentially.
So who actually, so this would be presented in the planning board meeting when somebody?
There's no planning board meeting, that's the problem. So I go get a permit to add 5,000 square feet on the side of my house, or I go get a permit to put a accessory dwelling unit, to build an entirely new building on my lot. And all this would do is say, okay, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to add an accessory apartment outside of your house, but you have to manage that water that you're newly creating onto adjacent properties. It's going to go onto the street, it's going to go onto your next door neighbors or across the street. You have to have a drainage plan.
And who gets the drainage plan?
The code officer.
The code officer.
All you need
Okay.
is a construction permit
Yep.
to, bring in the tiny house and put it on a foundation,
Yep.
or to add on to the side of your house, just as if you were adding a garage or something like that to your house.
So two things. One is the question I just asked, which was where does it come in and how does a person bring it in? The second thing is, may or may not be addressed in this committee, but I'm just giving you a heads up of when it comes to the board and, what I'm thinking of right now. And Galen, I didn't know if there's something we could do before it came to the board. So for example, for all these units, I had talked to Dan earlier about the growth map and the growth area. And so, I was under the misunderstanding that the whole growth area was on sewer. And now I understand that there's just a subsection. And what Dan explained to me is that anything 1,000 feet away was a sewer line was deemed into the growth area. So that's one part of it. From the board discussion, and I'm going to be asking for things about sewer treatment facilities. What does that do to our capital plan when we see growth? So that's outside of this. But the second part is, I think maybe it could be inside this. I don't know. I asked for the committee's input and then Galen's. When we toured the town from the water runoff from the storm, not even the surge, just from the rainwater on Sunday with the board and both of the chiefs, there's areas behind the colony and there's other areas within the port that have just pure runoff issues. So when I look at this growth period, this growth map, I would actually want Chris and other town department heads to look at this and black out areas that are not truly growth areas, because we cannot handle water today, and there are, the thing that comes across here is that our town was not developed. Our town was developed a long time ago. The beach was developed a long time ago. There is, we are locked by harbor, ocean, we're on granite, we've got marshes, we've got a high water table. There's just no place to put water. We do not have water facilities, we don't have catch basins, we just don't have huge areas where we can go do this. So I'm having trouble with the growth area as a growth area. That we're just going to, I know we have the permitting and stuff, but there's really nothing that catches us in the town, any of our committees where you go to get a permit. I'm actually looking for us to maybe take a step back and say, we're in some issues right now with water handling, and can we use this opportunity to go back to some of the department heads, mainly probably Chris and Eric, to say, are there areas that we would just black off right now and say it's not part of the growth plan?
So I'm very excited to be joining the town of Kennebunkport because
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
when I looked at your land use code, Paul brings up a very good point in that we do not have robust stormwater standards at all for all development types. The only provisions you have are in your subdivision, so if they are creating a lot of residential development, or in your resource protection shoreland zoning, you do have some performance standards there for stormwater. I don't think they're robust enough, and I think it's evident in this latest storm. You see all the impervious surface, not in just this town, but in other surrounding towns, that I think are accelerating the flooding issues that we are experiencing because the water has nowhere to go. And we are living in an area where saltwater marshes, wetlands help to recharge and to keep that water from just gushing all to the beaches. And so I'm excited because there's all kinds of standards I've noticed that need a refresh, and I'm excited to go take you on that journey of proper land use planning and how we can do a better job at mitigating development impact on the surrounding community and the environment. So it's going to be a worthwhile conversation, especially with you as the board, because you're more of an informal planning group that I get to deal with. So I'm excited for it. I think it's about time that we take a look at some of these regulations and how we can make more sustainable growth occur. Because we do have to be in compliance with the state with growth areas, but we can mitigate the impact of any type of development to safeguard the taxpayers from burdening those costs. So I'm I'm excited for this.
So, like, I just want to be very mindful because, like, so I'm happy that you're excited and that there's evidently a lot of work here to do. But what's been very clear to me, if in the wastewater treatment plant tour, the tour with the storm, the rainwater specifically, not even the surge I'm just talking about the rainwater and what it did to the port and areas. There's no easy answers. So as a select board member, when this comes forward, I would have trouble going forward on LD until we have a firm picture on how we're going to handle this. Because I don't want to literally open up the floodgates on development or multiple uses until we have some understanding or a plan of how we're going to handle this. Because there's nothing. There's no easy way, and if there was, we'd already be doing it, and
Yeah,
so it's a tough one for me to think through.
I mean, there's a risk there, but at least with and correct me if I'm wrong, with the affordable housing development and the 2 or 4 poorly named portion of the LD 2003, they have to go get a growth permit. So worst case scenario, we got 20 people going in saying, I got permit, right? It won't be 100 this year. We need a stormwater management plan for everything that we build.
In a subdivision.
We need it.
You need it for
We need it everywhere.
everything.
Oh, I understand that, but we haven't had
You
it.
don't
But
have
I'm saying we're protected now. If somebody wanted to develop,
Right.
a parcel
Develop.
like the village
It's
parcel,
But not a
So-
single family,
so
not a
if-
duplex.
right,
They
so-
can skirt it. Like there's
Anything more
nothing in
than,
there.
once they have 3,
Right.
you
Yep.
gotta
That
do
triggers
it.
it, but
gotta
you
do
don't
it
have
yourself.
anything for just the code officer.
Right.
If they get a building permit,
right,
how do we mitigate the impact
Right.
of
We have
stormwater
nothing.
management? We have nothing.
Right.
right.
So-
And
And we're
We
feeling,
can do a
and
better job at
But
that.
that's part of my thing is we have the growth permits, but I would like to see some of those things put in process now for the growth permits. I understand the growth permits are our choke point for LD. I get that. I'm grateful for that. But also we need to, and I do think that there's areas in town that if we just look through the lens of water runoff, I think there's areas in town that we might just black box and say, thou shalt not, until we can get our hands around something. Because the sad part is I don't think people meaningly do this, but when we went around town, we saw new houses being built that are just slightly above the grade of their neighbors, and they were flooding their neighbors. And we've seen that down at the beach at
over and over again.
multiple-
It's everywhere, yeah.
but it's everywhere. And I don't think that, we just can't, we have to somehow acknowledge, and maybe in times in life when you're giving something new and you're going into detail, this sometimes is the time to address some of those things and catch that. So a new building going in should not be above grade, or to make sure that the language is in here and that we have the processes within our different groups that handle these building permits to catch those things, and make sure that we're not, one neighbor is not now taking a hit, and we do have, people that are in fixed incomes. We do have older citizens here, and they just, it's just not, we can't be imposing things. So I'd like us to try to figure out within this how to clean this up.
Here's what I'm concerned about. We
Yep,
have
I'll
like
stop.
very little time left to get through whether we're gonna do anything and present something to the board on these, or just say, look, as you said, we're not gonna do anything, and then that's for the board to decide. We'll risk the lawsuits because we're not complying with LD 2003, right?
Again, I'm looking forward to having
So-
many more meetings.
Yeah, I think that,
I want to
different things
finish?
we can address.
yeah,
Thank you,
sorry.
sir. What I think we need to do is take a look at these ordinances and decide whether or not they're compliant with our comp plan, how they've been amended. I don't see anything that in here that's different than what can happen today. The 2 to 4, I don't think is gonna really.
We're not
change
talking,
anything.
we're on accessory dwelling units.
You're right. The 2 to 4 is
And-
not gonna change. The affordable housing development would have to go through a subdivision regs, and they got stormwater management.
Right.
It's the ADUs that has the biggest risk, the accessory apartments, because they can be anywhere in town, there's no permit There's no growth permit requirement.
Right.
We could have 1,000 people walk in tomorrow and ask for a permit to build accessory apartment. So what kind of language, so do we put in the language that Paul suggested? Do we put in language, I mean, the preference would be that we have a ordinance on management and stormwater for every development. Except the, you know, the development one, they have theirs. But for everything that doesn't meet the subdivision, is there language that we could put in that would require, I mean, I'd prefer to have one. We'll never get that done in the next 2 weeks.
Right.
Is there language you could put in that says
Well-
that you know, if,
Yeah, I mean, my view is we can't just say, give us something, and if your expert thinks something is necessary, you know, you shall do it. That's, you can get an expert to say whatever you want the
Right,
expert to
so-
say. So that is not sufficient for me, and,
we will have.
and, you know, under resource protection in our comp plan, we're supposed to be the stewards, the comp plan is supposed to be the stewards, and we just can't be creating more drainage problems, which are newly resulting and newly likely because of this ADU change, this accessory apartment change.
Well, the accessory apartment, that part hasn't changed, right? This,
No, but you can now put one on the side of your house, you can build an addition,
but it's, you
And-
can today. This, what we're doing today, you can do that today.
or you can put a brand-new building. How many
absolutely.
square feet can I take up? What's the,
800.
what?
800, what
Yeah,
you've allowed.
so I can
Yep.
build like two-car garages, is that 800?
Yeah.
What's I can put a new two-car garage on the side of my house and flood my neighbor. The condition did not exist before, it would not exist but for LD, but for this change.
The detached building piece, yeah, and the attachment, you're right. But it's in our ordinance today,
Without any
without. any-
drainage plan
Right, right.
requirement.
So,
So
What I'm
my
saying-
language may not be perfect. We can always change it in the future when we say, Gail, I'm happy to hear that you think that when someone knocks down a house or when someone builds on a lot, we should have some kind of a drainage plan.
is that,
Every time you divide off 5 acres, there should be a drainage plan, or 3 acres. I mean, a 1 acre off of my larger plat. There should be a drainage plan as part of the building permit.
so what we can, I would suggest taking what Paul has and putting in there as a temporary fix, right? That will get voted on in June and then get added. So then at least any accessory apartments that come up after that point, hopefully it gets passed, but come up after the point, at least I have to follow that. In the meantime, we obviously need a separate ordinance on how do we manage
Right.
stormwater. And at that point.
That would
we
apply to
take
every,
that And then pull that out and.
Right.
You just have to apply
Yeah.
with that.
that would be my suggestion, and we have time between now and March to edit this. Staff could look at this, could say, oh no, Paul, you got this wrong, we should say this instead.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at it from an administrative
take it-
perspective.
Right, yeah, I understand.
So is that something we can have for the
Yeah.
next meeting?
And in our current permitting for ADUs, are they counted in current permitting?
Which is,
We mentioned that, so
Yeah.
we don't keep an active list, but we are getting staff to go back
But
and
if
do
it's a
that.
standalone, it's not, it doesn't go out as a growth permit if it's
Right.
a new building?
Yep.
It doesn't
It's just a building permit.
currently?
Yep.
Right.
Currently.
Right, so you can build
No,
two
we
buildings
we can't put
like our neighbor.
LD 2003 said they,
No, I mean before LD,
Yeah.
as it stands today.
yeah, we took that off a while back because that was our only tool we really had for affordable housing.
Okay,
Right,
We pulled off the
the,
requirement for a
the
growth,
growth. Okay, got it.
way before LD 2003 was even being discussed.
Yep,
You know, one of our representatives came down and talked to us, and we said, that's what we're doing.
yep. Okay,
All right, so, okay, so we'll make an amendment to the accessory apartments, otherwise known as ADU by LD 2003. Okay, so we have half hour to get through the next 4.
sorry.
So affordable housing, I didn't have anything there. I think I covered that in my memo. With what's considered, you know, the growth area for, the affordable housing piece. And the concern over private wells, so again, we discussed that a little bit, that if it's in the growth area, but there's no public water and sewer, that the legislature in their infinite wisdom said that, well, they can put them on wells. I don't think that's good public policy, but that's not my decision, that's the law, so. That's, I think we educated ourselves a little bit about that,
Yep.
what that provision meant. If we go to the affordable housing piece, it is the, I guess it's the following page, 24715. You'll notice the subsection D, which is water and wastewater. I sent comments to each of you regarding what's the comparable sewer system for affordable housing. When I talked to Southern Maine Planning and Development, they said basically if you have a centralized system that is licensed for 15 or more units, we'd have to keep that language in there. We don't currently have it. So Southern Maine Planning said we could clean it up if we wanted to. That's totally your call. And then we've addressed the potable well situation. So that's those three comments right there that we asked for research follow-ups. And then you'll see subsection G, the short-term rental license prohibition. I added that in per the committee's requirements that no units created by the affordable housing development shall qualify as the town's short-term rental license program in perpetuity for the structure's life. So we've covered that concern over the conversion of affordable housing in the future after 30 years to short-term rentals. And then I also put in the growth permit requirements. That way it just clarified, because I know LD 2003 is blurring the lines with affordable housing versus accessory apartments. So I put in there they have to follow our growth permit standards.
Which subsection is that?
That is subsection H, sorry. All affordable housing development shall comply with section 240-1112, which is your growth
Thanks.
permit. So I added those two amendments, and that's it for that section. Any questions?
So in G, for the structure's life, you were making that longer than 30 years?
Yep.
That was
Yeah, because that was the intent, is we're not wanting them to be converted after the 30 years to become short-term rentals. So we're making sure forever that they're not
Right.
converted.
I don't understand that. After the life of affordable housing, can it become whatever it wants to become?
You all had concern over them being converted from affordable housing to short-term rentals, so you asked for that language to be in there. I can remove it.
No, I think we had,
I think that was two different. It was, one, we didn't want them to be short-term rentals. And then two, there was a disagreement about how long it should be.
But this, I think your solution is a good one,
Yeah.
because instead of saying,
Well,
oh, no, I guess, no, I take that back.
I guess you could you can knock down the structure, is it no longer? Yeah, so do we have to actually have a time frame in there?
No, you can do whatever, if you want it just for the
I mean,
term
I'm
of
just
the
thinking,
affordable
well,
housing.
I bought it as an
think it's
affordable,
Normally, affordable housing doesn't allow for that type of, 'cause
I-
it's market rate, so you're capped at that
Right.
point.
The issue I would have with that is 30 years from now, if I want to take advantage of my own equity to do my own improvements because the value is so much more, why would I not be allowed to do that? I would want to do that.
Well, you can,
If you're saying if there's certain restrictions within affordable housing that would not allow me to take advantage of that, you know what I mean? As a homeowner, as somebody that wants to live there and owns that house, I wouldn't want to have that restriction.
yeah.
I thought about
But
that
the-
before.
Yeah, but the affordable housing, there's, the whole idea behind the affordable housing is to create housing for those folks.
Right, but it's the whole, right,
Right.
exactly.
So at some point, if they're able to move out of affordable housing to another location,
Yeah,
then they have that, sort of that restriction. But there's a benefit, the benefit of being able to get in at a lower cost than what it would normally cost to move into the town,
right.
right?
But
So-
any scenario, I owned it for 30 years and now I'm older. And, you know what I mean?
Did you-
I still have a fixed income. Say I wanted to use that equity. That's the scenario that I
Well,
thought of.
there'll be equity, but it's not, it's obviously.
But after 30 years, if all of a sudden the market value dictates it's worth
Well,
more,
yeah, I
I
could say
could
the house is
leverage
worth
that.
$2 million, but from affordable housing standpoint, you still have to hold it at 500,000, whatever the numbers are gonna be.
For 30
from now.
years.
Well, for whatever that time frame is,
Yeah, yeah.
right? I mean, otherwise.
That was the only scenario that came up,
Yeah.
that came to my mind.
I mean, I
To
hear.
leverage some kind of equity to do the improvements to maintain that house. You know what I mean? That's the only thing, like, that you want to instill in somebody to have that pride and that ownership. If that's the only way that they can do it, then I'd be okay with that,
But
you
then
know?
it's no, that's 30 years from now, we'll have an affordable housing problem.
Well,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I voiced
Get it.
my, yeah, I voiced my
So, I
things
would
on this
disagree
one before. I
30 years from now, like, you're right, like, you said,
30
but-
years
won't
from
be
now, I
here.
don't. Well, no, I just think it's affordable. I think we're sitting down, like, I think the short-term rental for the time that we're in the affordable housing is clean, but I think in terms of LD 2003, you know, we do have the 30-year thing from the state, and I really do think we have to stay in that. It doesn't stop us as a town from doing something different 30 years from now or whatever, but I think it's 30 years from now is way too in the future to predict what.
the only way you're gonna do it is to minimize the footprint.
Well-
Is to say, like, you only have this space to actually build a 1,500 square foot house. You can't, if you tear it down, you can still only build a 1,500 square foot house. That's how you do it. Like, that's a smaller lot, or you create an ordinance that says, you can have an affordable housing lot, you can only build 15, you know what I mean? That's how you're gonna restrict that, or a subdivision to only,
I mean, it can be condo units, it could be, you know, right, you could have the 5 condo
I
units
think-
on the 2.
yeah, of course,
I
the scenario,
think
like,
we're staying
Or
with
they could
the-
be rental.
yeah.
I'm not a voting member of this committee, but I would
No, I
stay with the
appreciate your
30,
input.
I would stay with the 30 and
I'm
make
just
it so they
concerned that
can't
30
do
is too
short.
short.
Me too.
You know, I could see where, I mean, it'd be a heck of an investment if you're a young person who meets the criteria of, you know, you're 120% of the median income. So in this town, that's 120,000 a year you're making. And you get an opportunity that you sign up and you're approved to get the short-term rental and you're 25. When you're 55, ooh, I could sell that for $2.5 million. That's a great investment. I would do that instead of putting it in the stock market.
Well, your income has to be at a certain level, I mean.
Just
have
when
to
you
be
start.
approved. Yeah.
Yeah,
And if
just
you
when you start, and then,
So it's.
Yeah, but that's,
60 years.
that's the American dream.
I mean, wouldn't it be
enforce it
like,
for
yeah, I mean, if,
Ruins our town.
to understand, to forecast out 30 years, I'd want to look back 30 years before that and see what's happened. Say 30 years ago, there was affordable housing built, and where is it now? What were those structures look like? How were they utilized? Are they still used the same way? What had to be dealt with those, you know what I mean? In order to forecast out another 30 years to say, yeah, we seem to be on track, or no, we're not, maybe you're right, maybe we need to do 50 years.
So you can't
know what I mean?
change it on those people now. That's the thing.
No, I'm just saying, like, you're right, I would want to look back 30 years before, what did we do? We set these up before, and here we are now.
I'd rather pull it in.
What do we,
I can tell you what's happening.
Yeah.
What's
So
happening?
Presque Isle, they had ones built in the 1970s, and they're now coming up, 1970s, 80s, they're coming up to the market. And the state is using community development block funds to try to inject funds, because the owners want to sort of leave now that it's a free market, they can charge whatever they want.
Are these rental buildings?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the state's coming in now and injecting funds to make the improvements and then putting another 30-year restriction on the property. So that's what they're doing, is a Band-Aid fix, because again, no one really did the proper planning way back when. Okay, we're gonna do it for 30 years, and then that's the standard, that's USDA rural development, that's their, and Maine Housing seems to be following that approach as well.
yeah, and I gotta pay for my own mortgage, I don't want to pay for somebody else's, my tax money to pay for the improvements on something like that.
That's what they're,
Yeah, no,
that's how they keep it into the affordable
Right.
housing aspect.
yeah,
So the affordable housing is in the growth area. That's the only area where it's being allowed,
That's where you could have a development.
where you would have the development of affordable housing. And we're concerned about the water runoff in the growth area at this point. It seems to me that we should go back to the other discussion regarding the viability of the growth area for this kind of development, that maybe it should be in the transitional area where maybe it's further away from the ocean and maybe less wet. That is where that sort of development ought to be, rather than in what we currently call the growth area, or maybe the growth area should be redefined, per some of the things that maybe Mary Beth said earlier. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this committee can review and should review the growth area map, and
And modify.
if we're going to look at it with a layer, a water, surface water, filter,
Right.
that's appropriate, that's.
Sure. And they
We can do that,
change
and we
what
should do
the-
that.
The way we define it, they can change. If we add 1,000 feet of sewer, then it changes, it adds 1,000 feet to it.
So we can always
That's a future.
decide on that,
Yeah.
anytime, right? So if a year from now we say, oh my gosh, somebody actually is developing like all this stuff, there's a chance that if people were passionate about it, we could increase that number, right?
Right,
From
but
30 years to 40 or 50 or whatever, right?
Well, it'd have to go to vote again.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
Then we'd have to.
You're only talking a year.
So what's the consensus on this?
My opinion is keep it the way it is.
well, the proposal here
30
was
30
to-
years, don't touch it.
The proposal here was
In perpetuity.
for STR.
Short-term.
For short-term rental, in perpetuity, it can't be a short-term rental. So you have a development, even 30 years from now, those units could be resold at market, but it's not going to turn into a short-term rental business. People aren't going to sell off people would not be able to sell and then, or just, start doing short-term rentals. Similar to the way subdivisions do and condo developments do. They say, no short-term rentals here. We don't want that. We want our people to live here and be residents here and have a community here. And we all live close together and we're on top of each other, and we don't want this to become a short-term rental community. So essentially, if we use this language, we'd essentially be, benefiting that community in perpetuity, that it's going to stay as an owner-occupied place and not become, some investor, someone just bought a house relatively near me at the beach, a company bought it, and they're adding on to it, and some corporation is now in the business of, a part of a big company that has bought. And the same thing could happen here 30 years from now. Someone starts buying these units and, making them a short-term rental place.
But I look at, but here's another side of the coin. I'm a person and I need some support for affordable housing, and I buy into this community, and I work hard, and I'm a member of the community, and 30 years go by, which is my working lifetime, and I'm older now, and other people in my community that are my neighbors and friends that aren't in affordable housing can apply for short-term rentals. But 30 years from now, I still can't. So why are we, so that's the other side, is that we took this person that we want to come into town, work hard, have an opportunity, but then we're going to handicap them 30 years from now from not participating in part of a market that they should be able to participate into. They're a neighbor now. They've lived here for 30 years. So I understand, but part of it is I understand affordable housing, but to me also, it's making people come into the community, giving them a leg up, and that's really what we're trying to do, but then allowing them to take the benefits. And if they're going to stick around for 30 years, and say all of a sudden 30 years from now, I have an opportunity where I want to go spend some time in a warmer climate in the winter, and I want to rent this place out, or.
Well, you could rent it for,
Or I.
it
need
would be a
some-
good arrangement. Go to Florida and rent out your place for the winter. There's plenty of demand for people who want to rent for 3 or 4 or 5 months. You could do that without a short-term rental license. It's just during the peak season when there's demand for short-term rentals. There's no demand for short-term rentals
Right,
in
and I
January,
can-
February, March.
Right, and to the build upon her scenario is I can own 2 affordable housing dwellings, right?
You could own, you could build it and own all of them and rent it,
Right.
and then 30 years from now, turn them.
Right, so it
Turn 'em
kind
into
of builds
the
upon
developer.
your, to be,
You would be a developer.
to be self-reliant, say, I want the opportunity to do that. It almost makes sense, in my opinion, what you were saying is maybe affordable housing needs its own separate, ordinance where we methodically go through all these scenarios, including the short-term rental, and have it,
Yeah, I'm
Makes
comfortable. I
sense.
mean, you could, if you moved out, let's say you did very well, and you said, I don't want to live here anymore, but I'm going to rent it. I'm going to keep the home. It's still going to be in my name. And you can rent it. You just have to rent it, meeting the affordability requirements. You still own it.
yeah, to me,
At your other house.
yeah.
That's during the 30 years.
During that 30 years.
Yeah.
So Maine housing doesn't really allow that type of opportunity to happen.
Really?
No.
Under the mortgage?
And that's just because it's subsidized, or?
It's because there are requirements from the federal government, because it's federal funds that are being used from HUD. So they put these deed covenants in there where you can't just rent it out to another person if you're a current rent.
And but that's.
That's if the funds are coming from,
Right,
Yep.
and.
if the funds aren't coming
You
from,
remember, when you go through this affordable housing, even if you go through the home ownership route, that's a federally subsidized mortgage that you're getting. So they have all kinds of clauses in their mortgage that's not going to allow them just to do subleases. It's not gonna happen.
But after 30
But after they
years,
satisfy them.
After 30 years, that's
30
another
years,
conversation that,
Another
yeah.
conversation.
And that's where, again, a realtor, big firm comes in and buys out. I don't think that's gonna happen. I think the federal government's probably gonna do something to keep that in perpetuity, to keep that 30 years, but, the homeownership piece, I'm not sure about. The rental, I'm fairly confident they're gonna try to figure out a way to keep it. But I'd have to talk to someone at Maine Housing about what happens with the homeowners after that
But
affordable mortgage.
if a developer comes in and does this and puts them at a rate that's affordable that meets the requirements of affordability, someone just gets a mortgage.
Yep.
It's not through HUD, it's not through anybody else. They get a mortgage from their mom and dad. They're the ones that write it, or great uncle. Then none of that applies.
I
right?
think they have to follow whatever the mortgage is, because they tried to take care of that carving out for
But it's
enforcement.
just, it'd be like the mortgage that I have.
No.
But what you're,
That would be different.
I
What-
think
what-
it's a federal program.
Yeah,
yeah, what you're.
These aren't federally subsidized.
yes, yeah. Maine Housing, if Maine Housing is involved, yes. This is
We don't
affordable
have-
housing.
Maine housing is not anywhere in this ordinance stuff.
So,
Where's
oh,
the- so who-
You're saying-
Use
Where's
the,
it
so use what we know here. The Heritage Trust comes in.
Yes.
That does not go through Fed.
How do you think Heritage Trust is getting their funds?
I thought it
Maine
was the-
Housing,
I
which
thought it was
comes,
the checks that we were writing to them.
Oh, really?
that's the small part.
You're so generous. Most of the funds that come for affordable housing come from the federal government in one way or the other, whether it's through Maine DECD, whether it's through Maine Housing, whether it's through USDA, rural development, it's coming through the federal government. I've yet to see affordable housing go in that's not federally subsidized, but I could be wrong.
No, but you bring up a good scenario where it's good for the public to understand.
Yeah.
When we define affordable housing, it's basically gonna be a funded, development.
Yeah.
Whereas I could be a developer and like kind of what you were saying, I could be a developer and say, I wanna do the right thing. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna create affordable housing, which is, I'm gonna build a house that's small, modest, and whatever, and I can own those and rent those out. That's not really, that doesn't,
The economics won't work, but
Yeah.
no, you're right, absolutely, the
not going
economics.
to.
But if somebody, if
A
somebody's gonna
developer
do
with
the right
money to
thing,
burn?
that's like that's the speculation that
Yeah, can we check that one out? Because I have the I think we need to just
Yep.
right. If
sure that that's
If I choose
true.
to build small houses and really, none of this even applies. I could do whatever I want with my places and whatever.
No,
This
well-
is really beholden to, the definition of affordable housing and how it gets subsidized in what happens after 30 years. Like, I could have small houses and apply for a short-term license, and if I get it, I get it. Or I could either do the right thing and say, hey, I've built some small houses, and I'll work with the town, hey, send some people my way, and I want to do the right thing. This is all,
But what I think what we're saying here is, regardless of what, you have 20 acres and you just, so the land, you got the land from your grandmother, so your costs are very low. You want to put in tiny houses, and if you went and applied for building permits for those houses, and you wanted, under the affordable section, to get the higher number of houses on your property, you could do that, but you could do that without any federal support, I assume. But you would have to then rent only to people who meet the eligibility requirements.
Yep.
Right, for 30
And,
years.
and if you got all of that, this would say you just can't have short-term rentals there. You're not gonna get a short-term rental license.
Right.
right, and that to me,
Robin raised her hand again.
Okay.
and that to me, that's where the speculation comes in over 30 years. That scenario, I wouldn't even want it in there. And if it's federally funded,
Well, if you
there's
don't.
so many
if
things
you-
that-
If you don't have it in, you have another hidden pond, because you have this high-density development, and all of a sudden, it morphs from the great intentions, you get hit by a car, and your kids say, this is really 2 miles from the beach, this is really nice, I'm going to rent these all out, and you'd have to apply for a license, of course, but you got this bonus because you said they were going to be
yeah.
affordable.
And it's not that I don't want to take it out. I want to talk about it more.
Well,
I
the
want
question
to
is-
talk about the scenario more.
The question is, do we do it for the 30 years, or do we do it for a longer period? People were suggesting last year, we wanted never to have to have longer than 30 years, and that's what you put in. You said for the life of the structure. If it's a trailer, it might not last more than,
That was my intent, was that it would last as long as it was deemed affordable housing, whatever it was, 30 years, or if we agreed on 42 years.
Well, that's
or
not what-
6 years. That's not what's written here, but that's what
Right.
That's what I was thinking when we were talking. last week.
yeah.
So
I'd
we-
be comfortable with
we
I'd
have-
be comfortable with the 30 years, whatever the period is,
So
it's
we-
there, and after the 30 years,
So section B of this page has the 30 years in.
Okay. So let
And
me,
then G is-
we have one.
I was looking at G.
Public, which is nice to get, so.
Yeah.
Hey, Robin?
Hello. I just, I'm thinking about this Heritage Housing situation where they do not pay land taxes to our town. So we're actually subsidizing them and paying for the taxes. So this affordable housing is different than that, correct? Like whoever owns this housing is going to pay taxes on the land, because Heritage Housing only pays taxes on the structure, which, seems, we are actually subsidizing them, not the feds. You know what I mean? So I'm just wondering, is any of this housing being discussed coming into town besides Heritage Housing? And that is something people should think about, that we are losing revenue on this housing that they're putting up through Heritage Housing. So none of this we're talking about now when you're talking about federally funded in 30 years, because Heritage Housing is 90 years, correct? So
Yes.
for 90 years, we get no revenue on the land. So I wouldn't want more of that. We're not talking about that, correct?
So I just want to take Galen through what you said, Robin. So the town, so this is why we need to look at the differences between Heritage Housing and then what you've talked about for the federal come. So, for example, when you say, well, how do you think they could afford it? And so, the town gave Heritage Housing land.
Okay.
And then to Robin's point, the town, because it's a trust, the town said, okay, we won't collect taxes on the land, we are only collecting taxes on the structure, and that's for 90 years.
Okay. So you did a payment in lieu of taxes.
Right, so
Okay.
the town has basically, you know, along with many townspeople, the town has, you know, paid dues basically to affordable housing.
So that's a great question that Robin raised, and it all depends. Like, if it is a housing trust, where it's a benevolent charity and they decide to do payment in lieu of taxes, they would certainly be exempt. However, there are developers in the state that do affordable rental housing, and they're paying the full taxes because they're not a nonprofit. They are a
They're for-profit, yeah.
Like a
for-profit
Vesta
entity
Housing?
that
Like,
is,
is a Vesta Housing?
A nonprofit. Avesta is a big,
They,
low-income,
right,
and they're a
pay
nonprofit.
property taxes, though.
They probably pay something in lieu of, because they're a nonprofit.
depends. It, again, depends on the structure of who owns the property. There are developers out there that they are the landlords and they are paying the full tax value. So
Right.
it all depends. You can also look at affordable TIFs, which we don't have any. I don't recommend it. But there's other mechanisms, so it all depends on the situation. But if it's the housing trust, if that's the scenario that Robin explained, then certainly that's a valid concern. Yeah.
So
It is a valid concern, because people here are getting taxed out, and we're paying their taxes, and they earn more money than us.
Well,
But the
I mean,
point is
So,
that,
you know,
I mean, they're paying taxes on the structure, and it was land
Yeah.
that was donated to the trust from the town, which I guess you could argue wasn't really earning taxes at that time either.
No, but it's, I've had this discussion, and, you know, the town did provide the land at no cost to the trust. So foregoing revenue there, and then forego revenue in perpetuity, or at least for 90 years. So it is, you know, you can't, I don't really accept the arguments that the land was, there's tax that's not being paid, you know, so the.
right, but the town,
continues to
our
get-
town fathers made that decision, and that doesn't mean that anything going forward would be made the same way if a developer came in,
Right.
an established, you know, affordable housing developer came in, the town doesn't have to give that developer that deal, particularly if they're not a nonprofit, especially if they're not a nonprofit.
Yeah, there's a state statute, and this is getting into assessing, where they're called benevolent charities, and there's a certain description they have to meet in order to qualify
Right.
for that. So,
I think our goal, Heritage Housing goal, is 25 houses in the next 5 years. So that's 25 pieces of land that were just raw land as an asset to our town, that now there's no tax being paid on the land, which seems a bit unfair to people who probably fall into the affordable housing less than 80% of the median income, and still they're having to pay the full value on their land. Granted, they can sell that land, but that's probably not the intention of most of them. So it's just something that I don't think most people in our town are aware of, that Heritage Houses doesn't pay taxes on the land. It's very hard to get them to say that in public, because I've asked, and that is the facts. And I would like to see affordable housing that is, you know, somebody has some skin in the game a little bit more than that, you know, because that doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of got a point. I mean, after 30 years, we're going to put something on it. You should have some skin in the game. You should start paying your own property taxes.
Okay,
Exactly.
but back to this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This short-term rental license section that is drafted, do we want to keep it this way, or do we want to limit it, no short-term rentals for the 30 years, or do we want no restriction? Galen's saying, well, as a practical matter, with the financing that comes through the state, you can't do this, but to Jim's point, it doesn't have to be developed that way. So my view is we should have a limitation for the 30 years.
I'm on the mindset to have it limited for whatever the years that we determine that it should be kept in the affordable. So if it's 30, or if we agree on another number, it should be that. And then after that, once it's no longer considered affordable housing, it should be free to do whatever anyone else in our town can do, is my view.
so I can make the amendment here to say, no units created by the affordable housing development shall qualify for the town's short-term rental license during the term listed under subsection B,
Sure.
which is your long-term affordability.
Right.
And that's where it gets recorded, and a covenant is put on the property that's acceptable to the municipality for at least 30 years, it
Right.
says.
Right, so it's 30, set the standard's 30 years now.
At least, yep, that's the,
Right, after that,
yep. Someone wants to put more, they can do it if they
I mean, it would allow them to do a rumor. There's nothing that says they can't do a rumor.
I think that's good.
Okay. So that's the only other changes on
Okay.
that page. If there's any questions regarding that section.
Yeah, we got 1 minute.
Your parking is, again, at 66.66 spaces per unit, and nothing changed there.
Right.
And then the last sections that I had in my memo outlined were your parcel research, so
Okay.
if we didn't want to touch the 2 to 4 units, so that's, are you all feeling comfortable with that, with the amendment of Paul's drainage plan and the minor
Yeah.
revisions we made?
For the 2 to 4 units, or we're not touching?
No.
the two
We're
to-
not touching that one.
Not yet.
No, not, if you guys don't feel comfortable, we can wait for another meeting. That's,
So we're gonna,
it might not go to the town vote, but it'll, you know,
That's
that's.
fine.
so we are gonna put what Paul says, or we're gonna talk more about that?
On the accessory apartment, where the
The-
proposal is
yeah,
to
the
include
runoff,
that for
the-
now.
Yeah, I'm just gonna add what he put in there and substitute what Lee J had, so that's,
So we're going to put the runoff also in the affordable housing too, right? Is that
Well,
just
that's
gonna be-
covered by the, they have stormwater management.
that'd be under that'd be
Oh,
under
that's the
Subdivision.
subdivision
Yeah.
development.
But what we haven't protected is non-subdivision.
Right,
We got-
non-subdivision,
I
we still
have-
need to have that conversation,
Right,
and I'm willing to have that with you all.
Yeah.
okay, I'd like to have it soon.
Yeah, I like the
I
map.
forgot who we addressed it. We gotta check the growth plan, to see who we addressed that to. We could take it off it, they haven't put it on us. Okay,
Easy peasy.
that was a productive meeting, I think.
Yep.
A lot of discussion.
Yep,
Stayed
I
on
think it's
topic most of
helpful
the
to
time.
have everybody here.
yeah.
Yeah, for
good.
sure, in person.
Good, yeah.
You can see faces and you can see what's going on. You know if you're pushing something too much or too low. All right.
Okay.
Paul?
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn at 8:01.
Are you sending your recommendation to the select board?
Yes,
I have to send it by the 18th, that's why.
yes,
Okay.
Yep.
Any additional feedback, we can just give to our select rep and they can.
right. And if you could, when you do the drainage, just correct the numbering so that it, my automatic thing was wanting to
Yep.
do what I didn't want it to do.
You got a motion on the
I,
table?
s- I
You have one?
second the motion.
Okay. Any other further discussion? Okay, so then before we go, next meeting is February, what?
February.
Beginning of the month.
It's the first Tuesday in February.
Like like, what is it, Groundhog Day or something like that?
Is it Groundhog Day?
I don't know, probably.
6th.
The 6th?
Wow.
February 6th.
February already.
Yep.
Wow.
All right.
Great.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry.
I'm not voting. Just saying.
Good job, I was checking.
You all adjourned?
Yes.
All right, I'm going off.
Thank you, Robin.